How long was Jesus' ministry? Do you all recall? Anybody remember? 3 years, exactly. So, I've been here 3 years. Now, I get it. I'm no Jesus, right? I get it. But I'm saying, think of the difference that Jesus made in his 3 years. Now, I'm going to tell you, I know you love me. No worries about that. I love you right back. But if I were to walk out here this morning and fall into a sinkhole or be captured up by aliens and taken off to God knows where, if I were gone after 3 years, you would miss me. I know you would. At least say you would, yes. And I know you take a picture of me and you put it up in the library like everybody else. And in fact, I wanted to tell you, Richard's already taken the picture. It's ready to go, just in case anything happens. Right? But we would move on. You would move on. Yeah, you would. Now, Jesus lived a total of 33 years, but his active ministry was 3 years. And in that time, he changed the world. Right? And I mean, like lots of people, we say change the world. We use that sort of, but he really seriously changed everything, didn't he? Like here we are, 2,000 years later, and we can't stop talking about him. All over the world, billions of people this morning are talking about Jesus and following his way. And why is that? And I think it is because of the things that he did that were both courageous and unheard of. Both courageous and outrageous. And I'm not just talking about the miracles. The miracles were great. Glad he did them. They did a lot for our faith. It's super. But that's not what I think causes us to talk about him some 2,000 years later all around the world. I think he did things that were and are completely scandalous in lots of ways. And here's what I'm talking about. Today's gospel, Luke 17. Now remember where we are in the story that Luke is telling us. Jesus has been born, had a ministry, and he's been down in Jerusalem, and then he went back up to Galilee. So geographically he's been down here, he's up here, and now he's heading back to where? To Jerusalem. Why? To be killed. Yeah. He's going to Jerusalem where he will be crucified. And on the way, he has to cover this geography. And he has to go through this sort of border region where his people, the Pharisaic Jews, were kind of in one area, and the Samaritans, the hated Samaritans, were also there. It was kind of a border region. So he's going from Galilee down to Jerusalem through this kind of no man's land where the other existed. You might even say the enemy existed. The Samaritans and the Pharisaic Jews did not get along. The Pharisees were Jesus' people, right? And the Samaritans were not. Different temples that were by this time not around as much, but different leadership. Different claim to the historic faith is really what's going on. Samaritans. So he comes down and he's in this region and he sees 10 lepers. Now, in those days, when we say leper in these days, we're not talking about the way we think of it. It's any of a number of skin diseases that were visible and potentially contagious. And they didn't have doctors where you went to, oh, listen, I got to go to the doctor, I've got a skin disease. You went to the priest. And the priest looked at it and said, this is a bad one. This is not good. This could be contagious for the community. You have to go live outside the community for a while. And then if it got better, if you were healed or just it went away, you would go back to the priest and show yourself to the priest and say, hey, look. And he'd go, yep, it's better. You can come back. That's what's going on. And so these lepers, he goes to a village, and these lepers come to him, these 10 lepers, and it was a mixed community. Some Pharisaic Jews, we take it. 9 in our story today, it looks like. 1, at least, and probably more, Samaritans. The hated other. Isn't it funny that when you're kicked out by your community, you live with anybody? Even people you wouldn't have otherwise thought of. Yeah? Right? Okay, so he goes there, and they see him, and they approach him, and they kind of keep their distance, but they say, please heal us, and he does heal them. And he says to them, go back and show yourself to your priests. And they do. They're heading off. And one turns around and comes back and thinks to thank the person who healed him, right? The God, if you will, that healed him. And which is that person? the Samaritan, right? The other, the hated other, right? And what I wanted to say about that was, there's a lot of sermons going to be preached this morning about gratitude. Don't forget to be thankful. And I have a great one. I got one in the can. I preached it several years ago. I never do this, by the way, to go back and preach things over. But if I wanted to, I have a great sermon. And I can just make it up right now. Be grateful. Right? There's a great sermon in this about that. And you should be grateful. And whatever you do when you go out today, be grateful. It's all good. But that's not what I want to preach about today. That's what I don't think that's the heart of this story. Sorry, I get worked up. I did the early service, did too, didn't I, Joe? I get so excited talking about this. The heart of this story is that Jesus healed the other, who then came back to thank him. The point is, God is ahead of us in the world, with those whom we would not be with. Right? Jesus is out doing God's work. I was saying earlier, we spend so much time thinking about our salvation. Am I saved? How do I get saved? What words do I do? How am I baptized? What church should I go to? Am I good enough? Can I pray right enough? Am I forgiven? All that. I want to just tell you right up front, I've done this before, I wanted to sink in, you're saved, brothers and sisters. Any question about that, come see me. I'll just tell it to you the same way anyway. But you're not dead, brothers and sisters. And while you're saved but alive, you're called into God's work, which is what? Reconciliation, which is what? Taking care of the other, being reconciled. And God is out in the world, places where you wouldn't even want to go, loving people that you wouldn't even want to love. That's the story today. Jesus is doing God's work. Now, God didn't just invent it with Jesus. God was doing it all before Jesus. What was Jesus's, when he had a Bible, what was it? It wasn't this one. What was it? It was this much of this one. He had the Old Testament. So our Old Testament reading today is the same thing. Naaman, right, a great warrior, but not a Jew. Where was Naaman? He was in what is now called Syria. Naaman was a great warrior in Syria, and he had a skin disease. And apparently the people around him couldn't get it cured. And in fact, in one of the raids, they brought back an Israelite woman. And the Israelite woman who served someone in that community, this Syrian community, this non-Pharisaic, this non-Jewish community, said, hey, listen, I know somebody who can take care of that. One of our prophets back in Israel. Why don't you go on back and talk to him? So he did, even though there was a little conflict about all that. But he did. And Elisha says, just go in the river. And he's like, we have better rivers where I live. What are you talking about? We have big rivers. And it's like, let's go in this little river. And he does and is cured. And the point is, Jesus is living into the same story where God is ahead of us, doing work that is God's work, to which we are called in places that we wouldn't go, with people to whom we would not minister. And that's the message today. Of all the things that God does and that Jesus did, the most extraordinary, the most miraculous, the most courageous, the most outrageous, the most scandalous, the most frustrating, the most inspirational things turn out to be the demonstration that God has a deep, unending desire to go where we refuse to go. And God calls us to go there. That's the scandalous thing. That's the outrageous thing. Think of all the boundaries that we set up. We create boundaries, and what does God do? God ignores them. God says, nice little boundary you got there. Knocks it down. Right? God does not apparently respect the boundaries which we set up around ourselves. The cultural boundaries. We create them, God ignores them. Look at Naaman. Right? Religious and community boundaries, Jesus ignores them. Look at the Samaritan lepers. Can we knock down the barriers that we have created? Can we not create new barriers? God's just going to knock them down anyway. Right? What cultural, what community, what religious barriers have we either set up or do we support? Ask that question really seriously. After you're done giving gratitude, ask yourself the question, how am I participating in boundaries that God would not have me participate in? Here's the thing, God is already at work tearing them down, right? And people are already joining God in that work, which is work of equality and work of respect and work of justice and work of humanity and work of humility and work of love. And the question for us is, are we outraged by that work that God is doing, or are we encouraged by that work that God is doing? It isn't that we can stop God. Try that. God, I don't want to love those people, and I don't want you to love those people, so stop it. Good luck. Are we outraged or encouraged by what God is doing? Are we indifferent to that work? Right? Do we want to claim every other part of the message except that? Well, I'm telling you what, if you exclude this message of God's work among those who are outcast, the boundary work, you might as well throw the Bible away, because that's what it's about. Most of it is about that. And if we have not already joined with God, with Jesus, in this boundary-destroying work, when will we? You're still alive, right? You're saved, but you're still alive. You're called to do the boundary-destroying work. Do you know what I mean by that? I mean, just get in there and start tearing it down. Because there's somebody on the other side of that boundary that you're called to love. God is already out in the world loving. If you get out there and start knocking down boundaries, you might just meet God. In fact, I guarantee you, if you will do the work of tearing down boundaries in the world, you will meet God there.